The crowd roared as Muhammad Ali dodged another wild punch from Terrence the Destroyer Jackson. Madison Square Garden vibrated with the collective energy of 20,000 screaming fans. Sweat glistened on Ali's forehead as he danced around his opponent with that familiar grace, almost floating across the canvas despite this being the 10th round. The Destroyer was living up to his name tonight, a young, hungry fighter with sledgehammers for fists who had already sent 3 opponents to the hospital this year. "Finish him, Dad." The voice barely carried over the cacophony, but Ali heard it. His 10-year-old son Assad was sitting ringside for the first time, eyes wide with excitement and wonder, little fists punching the air in solidarity. Ali caught a glimpse of his boy as he weaved away from another haymaker. Something tightened in his chest that had nothing to do with exhaustion. The boy's face was a mirror of his own. The same determined jaw, the same fierce eyes, but there was something else there too. Something Ali recognized with a pang of discomfort: bloodlust. "Kill him, Dad! Knock him out!" Assad shouted again, bouncing in his seat. In that split second of distraction, Jackson connected with a crushing right hook that sent Ali stumbling backward. The crowd gasped. This wasn't supposed to happen. The great Muhammad Ali didn't stumble. 10 seconds left in the round, someone shouted from Ali's corner. The Destroyer, sensing opportunity, charged forward with renewed vigor, eyes wild with the prospect of becoming the man who knocked out the greatest boxer of all time. Ali steadied himself, his vision clearing just in time to see Jackson winding up for what would surely be a knockout blow if it landed. Time seemed to slow. Ali saw the opening. Jackson's left side completely exposed, his chin tilted just enough. One perfectly timed counterpunch could end this fight right now. One punch could send Jackson crashing to the canvas, possibly unconscious, definitely injured. One punch could show his son what it meant to be the greatest. "Dad, now, finish him now." Assad's voice again, desperate with excitement. Ali's muscles coiled, ready to unleash hell. But then he saw it. Behind Jackson, in the crowd, a woman clutching a small child to her chest, both wearing Team Destroyer t-shirts. The woman's face was contorted with fear, her hand covering the child's eyes. The bell rang, signaling the end of the round. Ali lowered his fist, stepping back as the referee moved between them. Jackson, still running on adrenaline, took a moment to register that the round was over. When he did, he slumped slightly, relief flooding his face. As Ali turned toward his corner, his eyes met his son's. The boy's expression had transformed from excited anticipation to confused disappointment. "What happened, Dad? You had him!" Ali sat heavily on his stool as his team swarmed around him, applying ice, offering water. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, leaned in close. "What the hell was that, champ? You had him dead to rights?" Ali took a long swig of water, his eyes never leaving his son's face. "I saw his family," he said quietly. Dundee followed his gaze to Assad, understanding dawning on his weathered face. "2 more rounds," Dundee said, patting Ali's shoulder. "But remember, this kid's dangerous. He's got nothing to lose and everything to gain by taking you down." The 1-minute break felt like seconds. Before Ali knew it, the bell was ringing again and he was back on his feet, facing the Destroyer, a man 15 years his junior with dreams of becoming the next great heavyweight champion. As they circled each other in the center of the ring, Ali noticed something he hadn't before. Beyond the ferocity and hunger in Jackson's eyes, there was fear, not of being hurt, but of failing, of coming this close to greatness only to fall short. Ali recognized that fear. He'd seen it in the mirror many times over his long career. Jackson lunged forward with another powerful combination. This time, instead of dancing away, Ali stood his ground, blocking and absorbing the blows that reverberated through his aging body. From the corner of his eye, he could see Assad watching, confusion turning to concern on his young face. What lesson was he teaching his son tonight? What would the boy remember about this moment years from now? The roar of the crowd faded as Ali faced a decision far more important than whether to win or lose a boxing match. He was deciding what kind of man he wanted his son to become. "What's wrong with Dad?" Assad asked, tugging on Angelo Dundee's sleeve as the 11th round began. "He's not fighting like himself." Dundee glanced down at the boy, then back at the ring where Ali was methodically blocking Jackson's increasingly desperate attacks, without launching any significant offense of his own. "Your dad's fighting exactly like himself," Dundee replied, his voice gruff but gentle. "You just haven't been watching long enough to see it." Confusion clouded Assad's face. but he's not knocking him out. Everyone says Dad's the greatest because he knocks people out. Dundee sighed. There's more than one way to be great, kid. In the ring, Ali was weathering a storm. Jackson, sensing that the legend might be vulnerable, had unleashed everything in his arsenal. Punches came from all angles. Some landing, most missing as Ali employed his rope-a-dope strategy, letting Jackson tire himself out. The crowd's mood had shifted. What began as bloodthirsty excitement had transformed into something more complex. They were witnessing something unexpected from Ali, not the flashy dominance they'd paid to see, but a different kind of mastery. At ringside, sports commentator Howard Cosell leaned into his microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're seeing here is puzzling to say the least. Ali has Jackson right where he wants him, yet he's holding back. This isn't the Ali we know, the man who predicted rounds and delivered knockouts with poetic precision. His co-commentator nodded in agreement. You have to wonder if age is finally catching up to the champ. He's 38 years old, facing a 23-year-old powerhouse. Maybe he simply doesn't have that killer instinct anymore. The words carried across the arena and found their way to Assad's ears. The boy's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. That's not true, he shouted at the commentators, though they couldn't hear him. My dad can knock anybody out. He's just... Dundee placed a calming hand on the boy's shoulder. Watch, he said simply. In the ring, something had changed. Jackson, exhausted from his barrage of punches, had slowed considerably. His arms hung lower. His footwork became sluggish. Ali, despite taking several hard hits, looked relatively fresh as he moved with deliberate purpose. Then, with precision that defied his years, Ali struck, not with a devastating knockout blow, but with a perfectly timed combination that sent Jackson stumbling backward. It was enough to score points, enough to demonstrate superiority, but not enough to cause serious damage. The crowd erupted, sensing a turning point in the fight. Assad jumped to his feet, cheering wildly. That's it, Dad, now finish him. But Ali didn't press his advantage. Instead, he circled away, giving Jackson space to recover. The bell rang, ending the 11th round. Only one more to go. As Ali returned to his corner, his eyes met Assad's. The boy's expression was a mixture of pride and confusion. Why didn't you knock him out, Dad? Assad asked as soon as Ali sat down. Before Ali could answer, a commotion erupted across the ring. Jackson had collapsed onto his stool, and his team was working frantically around him. The ringside doctor climbed through the ropes to examine him. What's happening? Assad asked, standing on his tiptoes to see better. Dundee's face turned grim. The kid's in trouble. Ali watched silently as the medical team huddled around Jackson. The crowd had gone eerily quiet, sensing that something was wrong. After what felt like an eternity, Jackson stood up, waving off his concerned team. He looked across the ring directly at Ali and nodded once, a gesture of determination, of refusing to quit. The doctor spoke briefly with the referee, who then approached Ali's corner. Jackson's got a possible concussion, the referee said quietly. Doc says one more solid hit to the head could do permanent damage. I'm considering stopping the fight. Ali glanced across the ring at Jackson, who stood tall despite the obvious pain and disorientation. Then he looked down at his son, whose eyes were wide with concern. Let me talk to him, Ali said, rising from his stool. The referee hesitated, then nodded. Make it quick. As the 12th and final round was about to begin, Ali did something unexpected. He walked across the ring to Jackson's corner. The crowd murmured in confusion. Assad leaned forward, straining to hear what his father was saying. What's he doing? The boy asked Dundee. The old trainer shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Being Muhammad Ali. In the center of the ring, Ali spoke quietly to Jackson, their faces close together. Words meant only for each other. After a moment, Jackson nodded, determination flashing across his battered face. The bell rang. The final round began. And as Assad watched in growing bewilderment, his father and Terrence the Destroyer Jackson engaged in 3 minutes of what could only be described as a masterclass in boxing technique, without either man trying to seriously hurt the other. The morning after the fight, headlines across the country screamed variations of the same sentiment. Ali shows mercy. The greatest chooses humanity over glory. Ali and Jackson, a lesson in sportsmanship. In the kitchen of Ali's suburban Chicago home, Assad sat at the breakfast table staring at the newspaper his father was reading. The front page photo showed Ali and Jackson embracing after the final bell, both men bloodied, but standing. "They're saying you should have knocked him out," Assad said, pushing his cereal around the bowl without eating. "Jimmy's dad called and said you threw the fight." Ali lowered the paper, studying his son's troubled face. The judges had awarded Ali a unanimous decision victory, but it wasn't the spectacular knockout everyone had expected. The boy was still trying to process what he'd witnessed. "What do you think?" Ali asked. "Did I throw the fight?" Assad frowned, considering the question seriously. "No," he said finally. "But you could have knocked him out. I saw it. In the 10th round, you had him." Ali nodded. "I did. So why didn't you?" Before Ali could answer, the phone rang. His wife Lonnie answered it in the living room, then called out, "Mohammed, it's Howard Cosell. He wants a statement about the fight." Ali sighed. "Tell him I'll call him back." He returned his attention to his son. "Come on," he said, standing up. "Let's go for a drive." 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of Cook County Hospital. Assad looked at his father in confusion as they walked through the automatic doors into the bustling emergency room. "Why are we here, Dad? Are you hurt from the fight?" Ali shook his head, guiding his son through the crowded waiting area to the reception desk. After a brief conversation with the nurse, they were directed to the elevator. "4th floor," Ali said, pressing the button. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into a quiet hallway with rooms on either side. Ali moved with purpose, checking room numbers until he found the one he was looking for. He knocked softly on the half-open door. "Come in," a tired voice called. Ali gently pushed the door open. Inside, Terrence Jackson was propped up in a hospital bed, his face swollen and bruised, an IV in his arm. A woman, the same one Ali had spotted during the fight, sat beside the bed, holding the fighter's hand. A young boy, no more than 5, was curled up asleep on a chair in the corner. Jackson's eyes widened when he saw who his visitors were. He tried to sit up straighter but winced with the effort. "Champ," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't expect... it's an honor. Thought I'd check on you," Ali said casually, as if visiting his opponents in the hospital was something he did regularly. "This is my son, Assad." Assad stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the man his father had fought just hours earlier. In the ring, Jackson had seemed like a giant, a monster even. Here in the hospital bed, he looked small, vulnerable, human. "My boy wanted to see what a real fighter looks like the morning after," Ali continued. "Hope you don't mind." Jackson shook his head, then extended his hand toward Assad. "Nice to meet you, young man. Your dad is the greatest fighter who ever lived." Assad shook Jackson's hand hesitantly. "You're really good too," he said. "You almost beat my dad." Jackson laughed, then grimaced at the pain it caused. "Not even close, kid. Your dad could have put me away in the 10th. I knew it. He knew it. Everybody knew it." He looked at Ali with clear respect, but he chose not to, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to understand why. The woman beside the bed spoke up. "I know why." She stood and extended her hand to Ali. "I'm Michelle Terrence's wife, and I want to thank you, Mr. Ali. The doctor said if you'd hit him with full force one more time, he might have suffered permanent brain damage." She glanced at the sleeping child. "Our son still has his father because of your mercy." Assad's eyes widened as he looked between his father and Jackson. "Is that true, Dad? Did you know he was hurt?" Ali placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I knew something wasn't right, and I knew I had a choice to make." Jackson's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I would have kept fighting until I couldn't stand anymore. That's what we're supposed to do, right? Never give up, never show weakness." He looked down at his bandaged hands. "The doctor says I have a severe concussion. If the fight had gone differently, I might not be having this conversation right now." Ali nodded solemnly. "Boxing's a dangerous sport. We all know the risks when we step into the ring. But we don't have to add to those risks unnecessarily," Jackson said. "What you did last night, it wasn't just mercy, it was wisdom." He looked at Assad. "Your dad showed me that being strong doesn't always mean destroying your opponent. Sometimes it means having the power to destroy but choosing not to use it." Outside in the hallway, after saying their goodbyes, Assad was uncharacteristically quiet. Ali watched his son processing everything he'd seen and heard. "Dad?" Assad finally said as they waited for the elevator. Are people going to say you're not the greatest anymore because you didn't knock him out? Ali crouched down to eye level with his son. Some might. People often mistake cruelty for strength and mercy for weakness. But that's not right, Assad said, his brow furrowing. No, it's not, Ali agreed. And that's why we came here today. So you could see what's really at stake in that ring. The elevator arrived, but before they could step inside, a doctor approached them, recognition lighting his face. Mr. Ali, what an honor. I'm Dr. Reynolds, head of neurology. I just examined Mr. Jackson. He lowered his voice. I wanted you to know. Your restraint in that final round may have saved that young man's career, possibly even his life. As they drove home, Assad stared out the window, watching the Chicago skyline recede in the distance. Ali glanced at his son, giving him space to think. Dad, Assad finally said, can we stop by the gym on the way home? I want to learn how to box. Not to hurt people, he added quickly, but to be like you. Ali smiled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. Sure thing, champ. We can do that. As they changed direction toward the gym, neither of them noticed the black sedan that had been following them since they left the hospital. A car containing Howard Cosell and a photographer, documenting the champ's unexpected hospital visit to his defeated opponent. The gym smelled of sweat and leather, a scent Ali had known most of his life. Fortress Boxing Club was nearly empty on a Sunday morning, just a few dedicated amateurs working the heavy bags and a couple of trainers giving instructions in hushed tones. When Ali walked in with Assad, everything stopped. The young boxers froze mid-punch, trainers mid-sentence. Then, as if someone had pressed play again, the gym erupted in excited whispers and respectful nods. Champ! Joey Williams, the gym owner and an old friend, called out. Didn't expect to see you today. Thought you'd be resting after last night. Ali clasped Joey's hand. My boy wants to learn to box. Joey looked down at Assad with a warm smile. That right? Well, you've got the best teacher in the world. They moved to a quiet corner, where a small ring stood empty. Ali helped Assad wrap his hands, explaining each step carefully. Too tight and you'll cut off circulation. Too loose and you'll risk injury. Assad watched intently, his small face serious with concentration. Like this? Ali adjusted the wrap slightly. Perfect. Now, first thing to learn isn't how to punch, it's how to stand. For the next hour, Ali guided his son through the fundamentals: stance, balance, footwork. He showed Assad how to hold his hands to protect his face, how to move to avoid punches rather than absorb them. Boxing isn't about hurting the other person, Ali explained as Assad practiced his footwork. It's about the art of hitting without getting hit. Assad nodded, trying to mimic his father's legendary float-like-a-butterfly movements. But sometimes you have to hit the other person, right? Ali held up the focus mitts for Assad to punch. Yes, but with control, with purpose, never with anger. As they worked, Ali noticed a small crowd gathering around the ring, other boxers and trainers watching the legend teach his son. Among them was a face Ali recognized: Richard Martinez, a sports columnist known for his critical takes. Don't look now, Joey murmured as he passed by. But the vultures are circling. Ali continued working with Assad, ignoring Martinez's presence. But after their session ended and Assad went to get water, the columnist approached. That was quite a show last night, Ali, Martinez said, notepad already in hand. Care to comment on why the greatest knockout artist in boxing history suddenly developed a soft spot? Ali toweled off his face, taking his time before responding. No soft spot. Just respect for the sport and my opponent. Martinez smirked. Some are saying you're past your prime, that you couldn't finish Jackson if you wanted to. Before Ali could respond, Assad was at his side, glaring up at the columnist. My dad could have knocked him out in the 10th round. He chose not to. Martinez raised an eyebrow, looking between father and son. Is that so? And why would the great Muhammad Ali choose not to knock someone out? Because, Assad began, but Ali placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Because sometimes being a champion means more than winning a fight, Ali said. Sometimes it means making choices you can live with long after the crowd goes home. Martinez scribbled in his notepad. And how do you respond to critics who say you disrespected the sport by not giving your all? Ali's eyes flashed, a glimpse of the fire that had made him famous. I gave everything last night. My skill, my experience, my judgment. I fought with my head and my heart. Anyone who says otherwise doesn't understand what it means to be a true champion. The columnist opened his mouth to ask another question, but Ali was already guiding Assad toward the locker room. "We're done here," he said firmly. Inside the locker room, Assad looked up at his father. "Why was that man being mean?" Ali sighed, sitting down on a bench. "He's not being mean exactly. He's doing his job, asking tough questions, trying to get a reaction. But he said you were past your prime." "That's not true." Ali smiled sadly. "One day it will be, son. No one stays on top forever. That's another lesson boxing teaches us. Everything is temporary." Assad's face fell. "Even being the greatest?" "Especially that," Ali said. "But what matters isn't how long you hold the title. It's what you do with it while you have it." As they prepared to leave, Joey entered the locker room, his expression grave. "Muhammad, you might want to see this before you go." He handed Ali a copy of the early edition of the Sunday paper. The headline read, "Ali visits hospitalized opponent. Act of remorse or publicity stunt." Below was a photo of Ali and Assad entering the hospital, clearly taken without their knowledge. Ali's jaw tightened as he read the short article, which questioned his motives for the visit and suggested it was an attempt to salvage his reputation after a disappointing performance. "Cosell must have tipped them off," Joey said. "I'm sorry, champ." Ali folded the paper and handed it back. "Nothing to be sorry about. This is how the game is played." Assad, who had been reading over his father's shoulder, looked confused. "But we went to see if Mr. Jackson was okay. It wasn't a publicity stunt." Ali crouched down to his son's eye level. "We know that. Mr. Jackson and his family know that. And that's what matters. But now everyone will think whatever they want to think." Ali interrupted gently. "People see what they expect to see. If they expect the worst, that's what they'll find, even when it's not there." As they left the gym, Ali's phone rang. It was Lonnie. "Muhammad," she said, her voice tense. "Have you seen the papers?" "Just did." "Well, there's more. Someone at the hospital overheard your conversation with Jackson. They're saying you admitted you could have knocked him out but chose not to. The boxing commission is talking about an investigation for match tampering." Ali closed his eyes briefly. "I'll be home soon. We'll figure it out." When he hung up, Assad was looking at him with worried eyes. "Are you in trouble, Dad?" Ali managed a reassuring smile. "Nothing I can't handle." But as they drove home, Ali couldn't shake the growing sense that this situation was spiraling beyond his control. What had begun as a private decision in the ring, a moment of humanity witnessed by thousands but understood by few, was now being dissected and distorted in ways he hadn't anticipated. And at the center of it all was his son, watching and learning from every move he made. The Muhammad Ali Center in downtown Louisville was packed with reporters and boxing officials. 3 days after the controversial fight, the Boxing Commission had called a special hearing to address allegations of match tampering. At the center of the storm sat Ali himself, calm and dignified in a tailored suit, his hands folded on the table before him. Beside him, looking small but determined in his Sunday best, sat Assad. Against the advice of his lawyers and managers, Ali had insisted his son be present. "He needs to see this through," Ali had told Lonnie that morning. "He needs to understand what it means to stand by your decisions, even when the world questions them." Commission Chairman Walter Brooks cleared his throat, bringing the room to silence. "We're here today to address serious allegations regarding the conduct of the recent heavyweight championship bout between Muhammad Ali and Terrence Jackson." He shuffled some papers before continuing. Specifically, statements allegedly made by Mr. Ali suggesting he deliberately chose not to pursue a knockout despite having the opportunity to do so. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ali remained impassive, only the slight tightening of his jaw betraying any emotion. "Mr. Ali," Brooks continued, "would you care to make a statement before we proceed?" Ali glanced at his son, then stood slowly, commanding the room with his presence, just as he had commanded the ring for decades. "I've been boxing professionally for 20 years, he began, his voice strong and clear. "In that time, I've knocked out some of the toughest men on the planet. I've broken jaws, closed eyes, and sent more than my share of opponents to the hospital." He paused, scanning the room. "And in all those years, not once has anyone questioned my commitment to giving my all in the ring." He placed his hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. "Until now." until I made a split-second decision based on decades of experience and a moment of clarity that comes to few fighters. I chose not to deliver a potentially career-ending blow to a young man with his whole life ahead of him. The room was utterly silent, every person hanging on Ali's words. Boxing isn't just about violence, he continued. It's about skill, strategy, and control. The greatest boxers aren't those who hurt their opponents most severely. They're the ones who can win without causing unnecessary damage. He straightened, his eyes finding Howard Cosell in the crowd. I won that fight. The judges scored it unanimously in my favor. I dominated every round after the 10th, but because I didn't send a man to the hospital with brain damage, suddenly I'm being investigated? What kind of message does that send to young fighters? At this, he placed a hand on Assad's shoulder. What kind of message does it send to my son? Chairman Brooks shifted uncomfortably. No one is questioning your victory, Mr. Ali. The concern is whether you deliberately altered your performance for reasons outside the normal competitive spirit of the sport. Is mercy outside the spirit of the sport? Ali countered. Is compassion? Before Brooks could respond, the doors at the back of the room swung open. A hush fell over the crowd as Terrence Jackson himself walked in, still bearing the visible marks of the fight on his face. Behind him came his wife, Michelle, holding their young son's hand. Jackson approached the front of the room with deliberate steps, nodding respectfully to Ali before turning to face the commission. I asked to speak today because I couldn't sit at home while a man was being investigated for saving my life, Jackson said, his voice carrying clearly despite its softness. 3 different doctors have confirmed that another significant blow to my head could have caused permanent damage. I had a hairline fracture in my skull from an old injury that no one knew about. Not my team, not the boxing commission doctors who cleared me to fight. He touched the side of his head gingerly. Muhammad Ali sensed something was wrong. I don't know how. Maybe it's the instinct that comes from decades in the ring. But in that 10th round, when he had me dead to rights, he pulled back. Jackson turned to look directly at Ali. He could have ended my career. Instead, he found a way to win the fight without ending me. That's not tampering with a match. That's mastery of the sport at its highest level. The room erupted in conversation. Chairman Brooks banged his gavel several times to restore order. Mr. Jackson, Brooks said when quiet returned, are you suggesting that Mr. Ali perceived a medical condition that trained professionals missed? Jackson nodded firmly. That's exactly what I'm saying. And thank God he did. Michelle stepped forward, still holding her son's hand. My husband would have kept fighting until he collapsed, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He never would have quit. No matter how much pain he was in, that's who he is. But Mr. Ali, she looked at Ali with tearful gratitude. Mr. Ali made the choice my husband couldn't make for himself. As the commission members conferred quietly among themselves, Assad tugged at his father's sleeve. Dad, he whispered, did you really know Mr. Jackson was hurt bad? Ali looked down at his son, considering his answer carefully. I knew something wasn't right, he said finally. When you've been in the ring as long as I have, you develop a sense for these things. It wasn't about mercy, son. It was about respect. For my opponent, and for the sport. Chairman Brooks cleared his throat. In light of Mr. Jackson's testimony and the medical evidence he's provided, this commission sees no basis for continuing this investigation. Mr. Ali's actions, while unusual, appear to have been in the best interest of his opponent's safety. He banged his gavel once. This hearing is adjourned. The room exploded with the sounds of reporters shouting questions and cameras flashing. Ali stood, shaking hands with the commission members, then turned to Jackson. The 2 fighters embraced in the center of the room, a moment captured by dozens of cameras. The seasoned champion and the young contender, bound together by an act of humanity that transcended the brutal nature of their sport. As they pulled apart, Jackson leaned in close to Ali's ear. Thank you, he said simply. Ali nodded, then placed a hand on Assad's head. This is my son, he said. He's learning to box. Jackson crouched down to Assad's level. You've got the best teacher in the world, kid. Not just for boxing, but for life. Later, as they walked through the parking lot toward their car, Assad was uncharacteristically quiet. Ali gave his son space, knowing the boy was processing everything he'd witnessed. Finally, as they reached the car, Assad looked up at his father. Dad, are you still the greatest? Ali smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his battle-worn face. What do you think? Assad considered this seriously. I think I think you're greater than I thought you were. Ali's eyes glistened slightly as he opened the car door for his son. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. As they drove away from the Muhammad Ali Center, reporters and photographers still crowded around the entrance. Ali glanced in the rearview mirror at the scene they were leaving behind. The media would move on to the next controversy, the next scandal. The boxing world would continue to debate his legacy, his place in the pantheon of greats. But beside him sat the only legacy that truly mattered, a 10-year-old boy who had witnessed his father choose compassion over glory, humanity over spectacle. "Dad," Assad said as they merged onto the highway, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Ali reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. "Be better," he said. "That's what each generation is supposed to do, learn from our mistakes and be better." "But you didn't make a mistake," Assad protested. "Everyone said you did the right thing." Ali chuckled. "I've made plenty of mistakes, son. Just not that night." As they drove into the setting sun, Ali felt a profound sense of peace. In a career defined by spectacular victories and bold pronouncements, perhaps his greatest achievement was this quiet moment. Driving home with his son, having shown him that true greatness isn't measured by knockouts or titles, but by the choices we make when no one is expecting us to choose mercy. And somewhere across town, Terrence the Destroyer Jackson was holding his son, grateful for the chance to fight another day, not just in the ring, but in life. If you've made it this far and felt every word, won't you leave without subscribing? I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you, who feel, who are moved, who truly live. If this touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.